Uh, Today is the third session of this training, FCCS training, and what you see highlighted in yellow are the topics that we have covered on day one and day two. Most of it has been covered. We also touched upon some aspect of consolidation, elimination, and translation during last week's session. Okay, but we will discuss about that tomorrow. So today we are going to cover the topics that are highlighted in green. I will start with some of the foundational aspects such as security, audit log, migration utility, okay, and then we will quickly go on to data management. Then there is a independent module called financial close management module, and a similar module called supplemental data management module. We will try to cover both of them today. So working with SmartView, so we will start from security management. All right, so security management. A simple way to remember how security is managed in FCCS is by remembering that there are three levels of access. The first level is there are roles that you can assign to users. Once you assign the roles, they get a certain set of access roles by default. We will shortly discuss about what those roles are. Two is artifact level access. After you give a role to a user, you can specify whether that user can access an artifact or not. And when I say artifact, it could be a task, it could be a data form. If you remember in the last session, we created some data form. When I say artifacts, it could be, a process approval, it could be a data form. These are all artifacts. You can prevent a user from accessing a data form, right? How? By using artifact level security. And the third level of security is data access. You can prevent a user, you can give two users access to a data form, but you can prevent one of those users from writing to a specific entity or a specific scenario, right? So that is possible. So that is a very simple way of remembering how security is managed. All right, so let's quickly go through the 4 slides I have with regards to security. Security is managed through the multi-layered approach that I just said. For if you are purchasing FCCS from Oracle, and if you are not using the demo environment that we are using for the purpose of this training, you will get access to something called as Oracle Cloud My Services, and in that service you will be given the moment you purchase, you will be given the role of an identity domain administrator. And if I'm not wrong, per purchase only one person will be given this identity domain administrator. This is the person who can log in, create users, and give access to the users to the FCCS application. If you have purchased multiple subscriptions like PBCS, FCCS, still there will only be one identity domain administrator. The same users that this domain administrator created can be provisioned to more subscriptions like FCCS, PBCS, and ARCS. So what happens when you purchase an enterprise license is you get access to one identity domain. You will be having one user who is provisioned as identity domain administrator. That user will log into Oracle Cloud My Services. It will look similar to the screenshot that you see on the screen. You will be able to create users, you will be able to upload users, and then provision those users to one or more of those subscriptions. Okay, so that is possible. And when you are provisioning them, how do you provision? You provision by giving them roles, right? And the roles typically are the 4 roles that you see on the screen. It is called service administrator, power user, user, and viewer. There are just 4 predefined roles. And how do you give them? You give them while creating the user itself, like you see on the screenshot. When you are creating the user, you can select the available roles and assign them. If you have multiple subscriptions, obviously you will see a lot more roles respective to those subscriptions. So what happens when you make a user as a service administrator? He will be able to perform all Oracle financial consolidation and close functional activities, including granting roles to users. Power user will not have all the access that a service administrator has. He will still be able to view and interact with data. He will be responsible for maintaining forms. He will have access to the consolidation form where you can kick off a consolidation. He will also be able to define something called as the approval process. He will also be able to access the data management module. User will be able to input data. He will be able to manage journals. He will be able to analyze data using SmartView and whatnot. Data management access if application role is given. So and there is another way where you can give some additional roles, even though at a tenant level, at an application level, you have given the a domain role called user to a user. There are some other granular roles that you can give to this user. So using that, you can control access to the data management module, which is the module to load data from ERP. And then the fourth role is called viewer. It's a very basic role. He will only be able to view tasks, view data, very limited role. Okay, so these are the four broad roles that you can give. And like I said, once you give one of these four roles, there is another level of uh, not artifact, I would say this is feature level role. So what you see on the screen is what I'm talking about. Ad hoc grid creator, ad hoc read only user. So typically this is used to give some additional roles to a user who has been provisioned the role of a user. Why? Because the things that he can do with that role is limited. So you can go ahead within the application. How you go to you navigate to this particular card called as access control. You go to application and then access control. You select the user and you give this granular roles. Okay, to further enhance access privileges. An example is administrating process unit approval to users with user role, right? So a power user will have this by default, but a user who is having the user role will not be able to administrate process unit. We can do this by provisioning this granular roles. Okay, so this is step 4, and step 5 is assigning artifacts. Like I just said, let's take the case of forms, because this artifact level access is most commonly used for data forms. So on the data form screen, you can select a particular data form like what you see on the screen, and then you can click on this key icon. Right, you see a small icon over here which is a user with a key. Once you click that, you will get this particular screen where you can say that I as a service administrator have created this form, I as a power user have created this form, but only Frank Taylor should be able to access this form, not others. Right, so that is called artifact level access. That is very much possible. And the last thing is called the data access. Right, so data access is basically controlling the segment combinations to which a person can write data, to which he can only view data, or he can not write nor view data. So that level of control you can do. uh, in FCCS, by default you can assign a data access for 4 dimensions. One is scenario, entity, data source, and account. So these are the only 4 dimensions among the 13 available dimensions where you can apply security at a member level. For example, you have 2 entities, one is Germany entity and one is Netherlands entity. You can ensure that one user is only able to write data to Germany entity but only view data for Netherlands entity. So that is called a data access. You can specify the segment combinations to which a user can write, read, or do nothing for that segment combination. So in summary, there are three layers of security management. One is called the system role. You can assign system roles to users. There are four predefined roles, and you have to assign one of those four predefined roles to users. The second layer of security is called artifact access, and a typical example of that is giving access to a data form. You can specify whether a user has access to a form or not. And the third level and the most granular level of security is called data access. And by default in FCCS, you can specify data access at a security, entity, account, and data source dimension. If a user has write access on say actual scenario, but he has only read access on Germany entity, the least applicable access gets controls what he can do on that segment combination. He needs to have write access on all the four members of the four dimensions. Only then he will be able to write data. Okay, so this is about security. So as part of the foundational stuff, I thought I'll just spend like a few minutes on audit log as well. Every action that you perform in FCCS is captured. This is very important for customers who go through this SOX auditing. Their auditors would like to see who changed, what they have changed, when they have changed. Okay, so that kind of an information can be exported from this audit log. You can get the audit by navigating to home page, tools, and audit. You have some filters that you have to select and apply. So one of the topmost filter is called a task group. You will have groups such as metadata, data, journals, process approval. So once you have that, you will have actions such as create, update, delete, and then you can also filter based on the user, and then you can specify a start and an end time. You can specify a range for which you want to view the audit log. And then once you have the audit log, you can export to Excel also. It's a pretty useful functionality because for metadata audit log, for example, an account dimension, if somebody changed the properties of an account, or if somebody changed the name of the account, it will show you the old value and the new value as well. So it will tell that earlier the name of the account was sales, but now it has changed to revenue or something like that. Okay, so that is about audit log. Another topic I wanted to cover is migration. So if you are familiar with the on-premise Hyperion, we used to have a tool called as LCM, Lifecycle Management. That tool is called as migration in the cloud services. And all that it does is it has an artifact repository. Pretty much all the artifacts that you work with in FCCS is exposed as an artifact with a checkbox next to it in this migration. So you can go to home page, tools, and then migration. On the left hand side, you will just see a plain list of all the artifacts. There is hierarchy involved. So for example, you have the topmost node called as planning. Then once you expand planning, you will be able to see dimensions, forms, data, supporting detail, process unit approval, and the various other artifacts that are in the application. You can select all the artifacts or specific artifacts. Once you make the selection, you just can click on export. And then it will ask you for a snapshot name. You can give the snapshot name. The snapshot name is nothing but a folder name. So what it will do, within the migration file system, it will export all the selected artifacts and store it under that folder name. If you ask me the difference between the export metadata that we did last week and this particular functionality, this functionality covers pretty much everything within the application. Whereas what we did last week, that functionality only had the capability to export metadata or data, specific artifacts. But this one has the capability to export everything. So for example, in a cell, in a segment combination, if you added a cell text or if you added a supporting detail, that as well can be selected and exported using migration. What are the use cases? The most typical use case for migration is to sync your sandbox or development environment with your production. They call it, Oracle calls it the clone use case. So if you want to clone one application into another application, you use the migration utility because it pretty much exports everything, including data, by the way. Okay. There are two tabs. Once you go to migration, there are two tabs. The first tab is actually the artifact repository, and the second tab is what we call the file system. So everything you export out gets saved as files. You on those files or folders, you can right click and say download. You can download them and keep locally in your system. Customers do that on a daily basis if they have critical information. Why? Because data centers are prone to errors as well, right? What if there is a flooding in that area? What if there is an earthquake because of which the data center went down? In that case, you will have a backup of your application locally in your laptop, in your data center, and then you can upload it back to the file system, right click on it, and then import. The whole application will be imported. There is another report called as the migration status report. It will give you the status of your import operation. It will tell you whether all the artifacts were imported or it failed. If it failed, why did it fail? So it will give a very detailed migration status report. So those are the use cases for which this migration utility is used. Most of the tasks that I explained just now can be performed from the user interface as well as the EPM Automate utility. The EPM Automate utility is also part of Foundation, but I have not added a slide to it because there is not too much theory to it. You just have to open it and do hands-on sessions using that tool. So there are commands like, for example, log in to my FCCS application. Then there is a help command which shows all the commands that are supported for it. For example, export metadata. When you try to export a metadata using a command in EPM Automate, it will ask for a job name. Why? Because the job will also have the POV details, the POV of what you want to export. Simply if you say export metadata, the system will not know what to export, right? So if you point it to a job, the job in turn will have the details of what to export, and thus the system will be able to execute that action. So this is about audit log, migration utility, and EPM Automate, mostly all foundational tools. All right, so with that, we will just jump into the data management module. Data management module. So this is a very, very important module of FCCS. On-premise, this used to be called as the FDQM application, Financial Data Quality Management. Later on, it used to be called ERPI. The full form of ERPI is ERP Integrator. And in cloud, it is simply called data management. This is the data integration tool that helps you bring over data from ERP into FCCS. There is a lot of flexibility available in this tool in terms of specifying the format, in terms of scheduling the data load process, in terms of putting some validations to ensure that you are pushing the right trial balanced data into FCCS. There is also scripting available. So it supports the Jython scripting, which I am not very familiar with, by the way, but it supports Jython scripting to do more complex things, right? Where you want to strip the accounts that are coming in from the ERP based on some logic. You want to remove the prefix, you want to remove the suffix, you want to do more analysis on the trial balances, you want to ensure that your assets is equal to liabilities plus equity while you are loading data itself. All of that is possible using the Jython script. So this is a very flexible tool. Okay. So what does it do? It allows to develop a very standardized data management process, and also allows you to validate the data before you load from the source system into the target system. Uh, the, uh, in the on-premise version, you were able to integrate the on-premise consolidation application with a lot of the on-premise ERPs such as JD Edwards, EBS, PeopleSoft, SAP, NetSuite, all of that. But in cloud, there is very limited integration with on-premise modules of ERP. So typically what Oracle recommends is you export data, transactional data from your on-premise systems, and then use that file to load into FCCS using data management tool. If the customer is on Fusion Cloud release 11 or higher, then the data, transactional data from the general ledger of Fusion Cloud can directly be integrated with FCCS. There is some direct integration possible. Regardless of what your source is, it is just a matter of specifying what your dimensionality of the source is, what is the dimensionality of the target, and then ensuring that the member mappings are in place. And then the steps to actually run a data load rule is pretty standard. It is primarily consisting of 3 steps. One is called export, one is called validate. I'm sorry, the first step is import, the second step is validate, and the third step is export. When you do an import, data from the ERP system comes into the staging table of the data management tool, and then here you will also be able to do a validation, and once everything is fine, you click on export, so data from staging table goes into FCCS. Okay, now what is the benefit of the staging table? You will also be able to drill back from FCCS into the staging table and then all the way back to the ERP. So if the ERP has direct integration, in this case Fusion Cloud, they have a landing page for all drill back requests for the exact intersection. For example, if there were 100 individual transactions that made up the account balance of one account in FCCS, you will be able to drill back and look at all the 100 individual transactions that made up that aggregated number in FCCS. So that is the most or coolest functionality of data management, I would say, the ability to drill back. Okay, and in consolidation application, another thing that happens is called as topside journal adjustments. So if there are some entries that got missed in the source system, or in some cases there will always be entries that are posted into FCCS directly, those are called as topside journal adjustment. Now these topside journal adjustments need to go back into the ERP system. That is called as write back functionality. If it is not an integrated ERP integration, then what people do is they just export out those journals, give it to the ERP administrator, and he will ensure that it is loaded into ERP. If it is an integrated ERP, FCCS and data management have the capability to write back that topside journal adjustment into ERPs. Okay, so this is about the data management.